Maggie, I want to know your thoughts before we dive into anything on the spiritual discipline of fasting. What do you think about it? Do you think it's like good, bad, indifferent, silly, helpful, formative? What do you think?
I think it is bad almost 100% of the time. That's just, and I'm coming into this with a lot of baggage. Uh,
Yeah.
as with anything, girls got a lot of baggage, but you know. Um, so when I was in high school, I, like many young women, had a pretty unhealthy relationship with food. Lots of
Yeah.
young people do. And I was also super duper Christian. So fasting was like a great way for me to
Mm,
not eat food and be like super spiritual and holy. And I didn't do it
yeah.
a lot, but it was something that was like, I like almost never fasted, honestly, but it was something that I was like, ooh, well, this could be like I'm fasting and that means I get to like skip meals and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's so pervasive, like that type of
Yeah.
relationship with food. Like I didn't have a full blown eating disorder, but I think that a lot of young people have really unhealthy relationships with food. There's also the really like holier than thou, like, oh no, I'm fasting. Like it's just very like, okay,
Yeah.
like, you're so holy, you're so special. Are you fasting right now? Is that what you're about to lead into? Telling me.
No, but I did appreciate that you ramped up your hate for it, and then you're like, oh no, Danny might be fasting, and then you worked
Yeah.
it back down to gently land the plane.
No, I was
Um,
like, this is a trap. This is Danny getting me to badmouth him and then
I am not fasting, but I was considering like fasting, but I was like thinking about this last night and I went back and forth and a lot of things you just said went through my mind. Like I don't have a super healthy or unhealthy relationship with food, though I don't know that I would say I have a healthy relationship with food, but I've never thought about that in terms of like, especially with young women where church already like with purity culture and other things can project like a lot of weight on young women. Fasting could be like a way to spiritualize that, and so I could definitely see how that would be problematic. I think I believe generally in the spiritual discipline of it, but I've never like really got into it. And I was thinking about doing it last night, and then I was like thinking about all of the things that are like in the way for my day. And I'm like, well, I want to work out and I want to drink coffee and I want to like not be cranky when I pick my kids up because I'm like hangry. And then like this internal voice was like, well, maybe that's why you should do it. And then I'm like, is that me like just being an Enneagram 8, like challenging myself not to be a
yeah.
baby and just do it? Or is that like the Holy Spirit nudging me? I don't. So I'm not fasting today, though I haven't eaten anything yet. But I'm not intentionally doing that. But I
Yeah.
did think about what you just said before we transitioned to me talking. I was like, if I'm going to fast, I'm not going to tell anyone because I do remember
Yeah.
when I was in like early Christian college, it was like, and there's like passages that like explicitly speak against doing this. But people like going around like making sure everyone knew that they were fasting and like being very showy about it, which I think Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, he's like specifically like, don't do that.
Yeah, he was pretty upfront about that, I would say. I
Uh,
I guess I have a follow-up question then.
yeah,
So thinking about fasting as a spiritual discipline, because I guess I was thinking about it very like in a utilitarian way of like not eating food, just kind of like the bare bones piece of it.
yeah,
But I wonder how, like, what is the difference for you, I guess, just in terms of fasting itself, between a spiritual discipline, something that is meant to be like growth oriented and refining, versus like self punishment or like self flagellation?
that's a really good question. My mind never like if this pendulum was swinging to that, like it never really went into like a punishment
Mm.
area, and so I think I naturally gravitate away from those sorts of things and that kind of like ideology, especially not growing up Catholic, no shade at our Catholic listeners, but I would say like that's something that I think is pretty unique specifically to the Catholic tradition, though maybe like other Reformed and other ones as well. Like there's some of that, but like there's rituals and rites of like guilt in the practices built in a little bit, or like punishment. So haven't really like, that didn't come into it. For me, it was like this, like the way I understand fasting and the way it was like taught to me as a spiritual discipline was it was like a way to reduce the noise and like focus on God. And like when you're hungry, think about God. When you're like, so it's like a reminder of that, which I'm like, I remember like stories of like in the Bible, the Israelites doing that. And so I could like certainly see that, but I've never really like made it a super, super consistent enough practice to dive into it. I actually remember, did you ever do the 48-hour famine? Do you like know that fundraiser?
Yes. Yeah.
That's like my only real memory is we did that when I was in like middle school, but we were in like the championship game of a tournament. And so I did like the 20-hour famine, or I don't even like it. I didn't even do the full version of it. And so it's like I jumped on this bandwagon and like didn't even do it. So that's my only real memory of like that, other than like I've certainly done like intermittent fasting for health reasons. But the idea of like fasting for reliance on God, which I would understand it, or like a way to like reduce the noise, I've not made a super, super practice. And I feel like where I currently am in my life, I have a lot of like things swirling around, noise and whatnot. And I'm like, getting me to the point of like, how do I listen to God better? Or like, is that a thing I can do? Like, I don't know, like, is the noise just there and there's no like way to, it's like my job to parse through it. So I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I said, like, the very first thing I said when I started to answer this was, I think it's bad, like almost 100% of the time. Yeah. And there is like, I do have like a little carve out for people that are like, they have like devoted their lives to, I recently learned the word asceticism, which is like I think this is the definition. It's like stripping away like earthly need and desire in order to focus solely on closeness to God. And I know that is a big part of spiritual practice for some people, not just Christians, but people of other religions too. So that's kind of like, I'm like, all right, well, if that's like your whole thing, then I kind of get it. But yeah, I was always taught fasting as a spiritual discipline as a way to weaken ourselves so that we had to rely more on God, which feels very self-punishing to me. So it might have just be, I wonder if like the difference in like teaching or presentation.
Yeah, it's funny because I do feel like the same, it's the same end, but a different description of like what it is. Like I would say like not beat the shit out of myself so I can be weak to rely on God, but like take away the things where I would traditionally get my strength so I could rely on like and like I think so that's interesting. It's like this wasn't the point. There was really no point other than I wanted to get interesting cold open. But
you wanted to trick me into saying that you're bad.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to do. But it points to the reality that like truth is in the eye of the beholder or the eye of the packager. Like the way it's packaged is going to influence the way you understand it. And so like we could both have someone standing in front of us talking to us about fasting in probably the most like value neutral way, like a way that would be palatable to each of us, not be convicting, not be challenging, not be any of those things. But all the things we've heard in the past will color and shade that, which I think is interesting. Like, and certainly true in this conversation. Also, you said you learned asceticism.
Yeah.
Like, how does that just randomly come up in conversation? Like, how do you just like randomly learn that in like a Tuesday last week?
It was when you or JT sent in that group message with the three of us about like, which theologian are you?
Oh, that's funny. And I took
the quiz and I got Teresa of Avila or Avila. Yeah. And I looked her up and I actually don't think that we align theologically on very much, especially because she was ascetic. Is that how I would modify that word? Anesthetic? I don't know.
Probably.
which is really like not my bag, but she seemed like a very cool lady. And I would love to know more about her. So,
Maybe
but
we'll
that's how it came up. That's how I learned it.
yeah. Maybe we'll drop the survey or the quiz in the episode description. Let people take
Yeah.
it, see what they are.
Which theologian are you? Which one were you again? Do
I
you
think I
remember?
was John Wesley, which is like the least
Mm.
interesting. Like since I'm a United Methodist, I'm like, what? Like
You're like,
that was a
well,
bummer. But
should
then
have seen
like I
that one
looked at the.
coming.
I'll be honest with you. Like I really like. I can't remember all the options. I actually did save a screenshot it on my phone when we took it. But like I love C.S. Lewis, even though I like don't theologically agree with him all the time on things. And there's a part of me, and I don't know if it's like my old early introduction to Christianity, because he was like the GOAT. He was the Michael Jordan of Christian authors when I was introduced to Jesus. And I don't know if that's how everyone views him or not, but like certainly that's how he was like presented to me. And N.T. Wright and I was like, man, if I could be like anyone, like I could. And so seeing C.S. Lewis on that, I was like, man, this would be my goal. But I don't even know if I really want to theologically align with him.
Yeah.
Other than I think both him and I agree that dogs don't go to heaven. So I think that's like the one thing that we for sure.
Well, you're both wrong. So.
What? Speaking of things I'm probably wrong about, what are we talking about on today's episode?
Let's talk about the difference between guilt, shame, and conviction. I think those are three big kind of like I don't know what to. They're words that get used a lot in Christian spaces, especially conviction is very buzzy. So yeah. I think it would be great to kind of like parse apart the difference between the three, talk about, are any of them always bad? Are any of them helpful? If so, which ones? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, like certainly if there was a Venn diagram of the three of them, there'd be, I think they're unique enough where they'd have their own circles. I think guilt and shame probably have the highest overlap, maybe. Mm-hmm. But I also think guilt and conviction have some overlap because guilt is not always. I think if I was ranking them, I'd be interested to hear yours. Like I would put shame as the most negative. Mm-hmm. Guilt is the second most negative, and shame is the least negative, or conviction is the least negative. Okay. So shame, guilt, conviction.
Okay.
Because I think conviction feels spiritual, guilt feels legal, and shame feels personal to me.
Ooh, okay, yeah. I like those distinctions. I think I would say that I would also put shame at the bottom, like the least
the
good
worst
or helpful. It's the worst one. Yeah, it's the worst one. And then I would flip conviction and guilt from where you had them. Okay. I think that, but yeah, I agree that they all have a lot in common. And there's definitely like, if it was a three-way Venn diagram, the circles would be like significantly overlapped. But I wonder, when you said that, it brought the visual to my mind. What do you think would be in the very middle? Like, do all three of them overlap at all?
I think so. Yeah, that's what I was trying to think. Like, I think they all call something out. Like that's a reality, I think. I think you can be, but then like, I think you could be convicted of something and not feel shame. And I think you could be convicted of something and not feel guilty about that conviction. Like I have strong convictions about queer people being included in the church, and there's no shame or guilt that I carry in that. So like I think conviction is the only one that could be packaged into like a positive that is about like something we're convicted about carrying and doing good with. Like I mean, they're all also, this is where the biggest overlap is. They're all motivators, I would say. Like they all are things that motivate us to change. Now, change not always for the good. The motivation's not always healthy. But I would say just off the cuff, that is what I think the biggest overlap would probably be. Do you think there's any overlaps?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think they definitely, there is some quality, like a thread that kind of ties them all together. And I think it is kind of motivation. Like they all three push you towards some action. But yeah, conviction is, I think, unique of the three in that it can be good and bad. So yeah, that's interesting. I'm thinking about, I'm having a hard time remembering the title. I think it was Fierce Convictions. I read this biography almost 10 years ago now. Let me just look it up because I want to make sure I get it right.
Someday we'll have like a media team behind us and we don't have to hop on our computers or phones to pull this media up while we're talking.
Oh my gosh, amazing. Yeah, well, we'll tell our producer. Sam, can you look that up for me? It is Fierce Convictions. This is a book by Karen Swallow Prior. It's a biography of a woman named Hannah More, who was an English abolitionist and artist, a poet and writer. And her life really had an impact on me because she had very fierce convictions that led her to do a lot of good in the world, like especially in the abolitionist movement. William Wilberforce is a big name that I think some Christians might be familiar with. He was really instrumental in the abolitionist movement in England, and was really driven by a lot of Christian thought and Christian faith. And Hannah More was a contemporary. She was very much in the same, like, on the same team as him. And they did a lot of work together to abolish slavery in England. And her name isn't known as well as maybe some other people. She was also a contemporary of like Jane Austen and was really popular during her life too. There was a pretty successful smear campaign after her death that made her just like kind of fall out of vogue. And so not a lot of people know who she is in the same way that they know who William Wilberforce is or Jane Austen. But she was a really cool lady. And there's a lot about her life that has kind of like shaped the direction of mine. And so when you talked about fierce convictions, when you talked about like the positive, how convictions can be a positive thing too, I immediately like thought of this book and I actually haven't read it in a while. I think the last time I read it was 2017. So it would be interesting, which I had not like deconstructed at all then. So it'd actually be really interesting now to read it again and see. I wonder just like through like new eyes or different eyes, like if I've changed at all, like reading it. I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to, I've just pulled it up on my phone as you're talking. I'll have to give this a try. I'd be interested, as you were talking, I was thinking about this, like I think the seat we sit in defines how we view this, right? So for me, like as a pastor, I'm going to look at shame, guilt, and conviction in a different way than perhaps you might or our listeners might. I was thinking about a pastor, he's now retired, colleague of mine who would say his job was to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comforted. But I think like the idea, you could like put conviction in there, comfort the convicted and convict the comforted or the comfortable. I just wonder like what you think the role of a preacher pastor is to utilize these. Is it something like, do you sitting in the pews or metaphorical pews or whatever, do you want to have any level of guilt, shame, or conviction? And if you were like filling up, have you ever played the game with like the little beakers where it's like you have 3 different colors and you got to get all the colors in their own one, and there's like one empty one, so you're like dumping all the purple into one and orange? You don't know.
No, but I think I get what you're
well,
alluding to here or talking about here.
It's not as fun if you've not played the iPhone game, but if you were trying to say like what percentage of each of those you want in a calendar year from your pastor, what do you want of guilt, shame, and conviction? And what, if any, do you see the positive fruit of those? And on the flip side, is there any sort of rotten fruit that comes out of those?
Yeah. I think I would love to answer this question. I wonder, do you want to just go kind of like one by one through like each different one we're talking about? So we already kind of talked about conviction a little bit, but let's talk about shame, just because if I'm thinking percentages, I want zero shame, honestly, because I think that the difference between like guilt and shame in my mind is like guilt is you did something bad. Shame is that you are bad. And I don't think that shame has a lot of like positive fruit. I don't think that I don't think it bears a lot of like goodness out. I'm having a really hard time thinking of a scenario where like shame that someone especially is putting on themselves or
from the pulpit onto
you is positive. Can you think of any scenario where that would be the case?
No, my inclination was you were going to say zero, so I was hoping that was the case.
Yeah,
but I always want to.
What if I had been like, Danny, 100. You could shame us more from the pulpit?
Well, so this is what's wild. Is like I know people that would say that, like pastors. I don't know congregation members that would say it, but I bet you there are. Like some people like that kind of rhetoric. I mean, some people like to get told they're not doing good enough, and they like respond to shame. I don't know that they really like it, but they respond to it. I did resonate with what you said at the beginning. Like I do think shame is identity based, right? Like it is about you, and it's not like I did something wrong, but I am the problem. Like I am wrong. And I don't know that people would always articulate it that way, but that is where I think this could fall apart. Like I had a conversation with someone talking about the idea of like sin and like the way we even package that, like in the Reformed tradition. Our shared friend Emily and I talked about this, like the idea of like you are sin or you do sin. Like I think shame would say you are sin.
Yeah.
Where what are our terms? Shame, guilt is the other one. Guilt would say I have sinned. Shame would say I am sin as a person. And the analogy she uses, like you wouldn't say I am cancer, you'd say I have cancer, where it's like your identity becomes the thing. And that's where I think shame, where you and I would both agree, should be at a 0%. The church, and I talk about this a lot, and why someone asked me just the other day why I chose to be United Methodist is because the theology of grace was not rooted in grace because of shame, where in my other denominational experiences, as small as those were, I perceived grace was the mechanism to combat shame, not even erase shame, but like balance or equal it out. And I didn't appreciate that theological perspective. And so even though I think you and I are both in kind of agreement, like, hey, let's put this in the zero column, I think there's a lot of people that would say like, we actually need to use shame because sin is an identity issue. That making, like our stance on queer inclusion is we're making something an identity. Like they would actually say that shame is the way to get to the heart and to reorient and reframe the identity, you know? And so that's where I can say, even though you and I are like, this objectively sucks, people are like, this is the best mechanism for repentance eventually.
Yeah. Well, okay. So then I guess my follow-up question, if I was like having a conversation with someone who was like for shame, like in favor of it, I would just say like, what do you get out of that? Like, sure, you might get change. You might get behavioral change, which is great. You might get emotional change. But like, if we're saying that who you are is sin, who you are is apart from God, who you are is broken, what are we supposed to do with that? You know, like,
well, I mean, the answer is we get Jesus and we get heaven, and we suck anyway. I mean, that's Reformed theology in a nutshell, is that you suck and you can't do anything. And so what you get is the rewards you never deserved, but you always desired, which was to stop being you and start being like God, right? Like, isn't that
Yeah, no, it
essentially
is.
like their theology?
It is, and I think that like, well, and now people who've listened to the last several episodes know my relationship with Reformed theology and with Calvinism.
Big fan, right?
Is so love it.
Yeah.
No. Hate it. Ruined my life. I have been running from it. But it like, if we follow that thread to its logical conclusion, why even bother
Yeah.
living truly? Like, why even bother trying to be better if the end goal is heaven? What are we even doing here? You know, and so that's
Yeah.
that's kind of what I was trying to get at with like the fruit of shame. Like, what does it get you? And not just you individually, what does it get the church as a whole? What does it get like our society? Because I would say it doesn't really get us anything positive other than a bunch of people hating themselves and just like a really sad group of people.
So I certainly don't agree with this, but here's what they would say to you is like,
Okay.
so like when we talk about producing fruit, who produces the fruit? Like you or me? God, us, who?
Oh, well, I suppose it would be God or Jesus through us, right? The Holy Spirit through us.
That would probably be what they would agree with. And I think potentially I agree with that. But what they would say is then you have to be in the vine because it's not you. And so you have to die. So I think like, even though it's all packaged as shame, like the destruction and diminishing of yourself is the only way to fully abide in the vine that is God. That would be, I think, the way they would package it. And so like, even though it is a complete diminishing of the self, what they are selling you is that your identity is the only thing keeping you from being fully in Christ. So like, be ashamed of it, let it die, throw it away, lose all of yourself so that you can fully abide in the vine that is God, so that you can produce fruit, even though it was never your fruit. It was always God's fruit. So God is the one producing it, which again, like in the same way, shame is like you couldn't do anything good and you suck. This is also saying anything good you produced is not of you. So it's not shame, but it's certainly like making sure you don't get any sort of like credit for what's happening in your life. So it's like this full circle of like shame and lack of credit that keep you living in that.
Yeah.
And any sort of desire for credit would be a sin.
Yeah.
Therefore you should feel shame for that. And then you need to abide more in the vine. So it's a vicious cycle.
It is. And at best, it's a vicious cycle. I would bring up something I said early on, which is like, imagine if a person said these things to you. Like, imagine if you were in a relationship with a human person and this was the conversation. Like, you need to completely lose yourself, throw away your identity, become solely devoted to me, and anything that you do that's good because of that is actually because of me. Run, girl. Like that is an abusive, toxic person. So I think it's really gross that we ascribe that to God. And I would also say that like you can have humility without having like complete and total death of yourself, right? Like you can still have individuality. You don't have to individual identity. I mean, you don't have to say like, I am so stupid and horrible and rotten. It can just be like, I'm a person who makes mistakes. I'm not perfect. So I feel like there's a much more balanced take to understanding that we are humans who make mistakes sometimes versus I am filthy rags, as Paul so helpfully put it.
Yeah, I would say, quick caveat, the things I'm saying, I'm not supporting. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here.
No, totally.
But think about this, that like everything you just described is like a super misogynistic, patriarchal lens generally. Like certainly a woman could say that to their spouse or a lesbian couple or a gay couple. But generally men have been like said this to their wives, right? Like, hey, you take my last name, erase your identity, become a part of my life. Like But then like you go back to like first century or even like ancient times, like women were property, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the lens of early Christian theologians would have been in this like idea that women are subhuman property. And for them to find fullness would be to erase themselves, fully submit, and be a part of their husband's life, right? So we have
Yeah.
that. And then we see early Christian authors who believe this, referring to the men who are the lead participants in church as the bride of Christ,
Mm-hmm.
or the churches, but like we are to be married in this kind of way, right? And so we are then to put on the same thing that we just asked our spouses to put on, which is losing all of our identity to be a part of that. And so you can see the evolution over the centuries, how this sort of like rhetoric and theological lenses come on, where now we care more about ourselves and we care more about autonomy. And I think we've grown into a better sense of like equity and justice and diversity and the beauty of God's kingdom. And we talked a little bit about this at the Drip, which is like a thing we do on the Well Thursday nights, which is like more nerdy, but talking about how the apocalyptic lens of first century writers gave them some level of precedence to not be like super great stewards of their existence because they were like pretty certain Jesus was coming back. So it's like
they thought the world was like imminently ending.
Yeah. And so like to be good stewards of creation probably didn't matter as much, though it's like, what are they going to do in a few years? But like probably not the top of their list. I don't even know that like being like equitable spouses, we're like, we're going to get our thing in heaven, right? Like, or whatever. So it's just like, I look at all of the impacts of the way culture was, the way the writers wrote about their relationship to Jesus, God, and the church, in relation to how they understand Christianity and theology and the end times coming. And then you take all this out of a 2,000-year-old book that we're now reading, and like, no wonder people have like shit theology because it's based in like a relational and sexual ethic and framework for society that like just is not one. I don't think not what we hold anymore. But I think more importantly than that, because it could be easily dismissed as like we've just wandered away from God's desire. But what I would say is it's not just not that way anymore. I think it was never God's intended desire for humanity.
Yeah. Yeah, there is like a logical fallacy that's I think it's like appeal to tradition or something. They all have little names. And basically it's like just because something has always been one way, or just because something used to be a certain way, doesn't mean that that is the correct way to view it, which is, I think about this a lot with kind of like the good old days, like, oh, we need to get back to some version of America or whatever. This comes up a lot in politics. It's like, it's a rhetorical strategy that is actually inherently flawed, because just because something is old or traditional doesn't mean that it was doesn't mean it's good. So
my in-laws and brother-in-law came to church on Sunday. My in-laws are a little more like traditional United Methodists and kind of like conservative in that regard. And then my brother-in-law doesn't really go to church, but comes to the Well 2-3 times a year. Knew about you, so potentially listens to the podcast. So John, if you're listening, shout out on the podcast.
Shout out, John.
But we did talk about it. We went to brunch after church on Sunday, all of us. And we did talk about that. Like I brought that up in the idea of, and I even think I said it specifically at the 10:45 in my message, which I don't know that I said at the 9, but I was talking about this idea. It's like we often idealize what was, and the idea that like what you hold as traditional is not true. It is an evolution and a modernization of something that 10, 20, 50, 100 years prior, people would have thought was like the worst, you know? And so there is this like constant evolution. And every time someone talks about, well, I want to do things the traditional way, it's like, do you mean like the thing that would have been seen as like really cutting edge 100 years ago? So it's like,
yeah, totally.
When do you draw the line? It's like everything was cutting edge at some point, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Not to mention that history is written by the victors, right? So even things that we think are true, especially about mid-century America, like if we're hearkening back to this kind of like post-war utopia, like that's not really real in the way that like, like it wasn't a Norman Rockwell painting. But we've gotten off track a little bit. Do you want to like veer back to, so that was shame.
Yeah, we need to get in the bucket. Now so shame, we're like, we don't need it, we don't want it. It's dead to us.
Shame, I think that you can get better results in a way that doesn't make you want to put yourself in the past tense. So I think we can.
We've put shame has no more claim on our life. It's out of here. So let's talk about guilt.
Okay.
Where do you think guilt has something? And like this again, I think I said it has more of a legal idea, right? But like guilt is like I did something wrong. Not as much like I am wrong, but like I did something wrong. And so I have my thoughts on it. But initially for you, what do you think? Like, is this a bucket you think is helpful, necessary, or unhelpful, or somewhere in between?
I think that it is helpful. And my mind immediately goes to child development. I've talked before, like I'm a speech therapist, I work with kids. Mm-hmm. Understanding when you have made a mistake and knowing how to fix it and move forward is so important developmentally. And if we lived in a world devoid of guilt, we would just have a bunch of like megalomaniacs running around that like never, had never like didn't understand that their actions have consequences.
Yeah.
So I think that guilt can be really important as a tool to show us, especially as children, but then also as adults, that our actions have consequences. And sometimes those consequences are negative. It doesn't mean that there's no way to repair. So the like, I am bad thing, there's no way to repair really from that. But like, I did something bad, but I can do something about it. Like, that's kind of the second piece that I would tack onto it. This kind of cycle of like repentance, repair, restore, that kind of thing of like, I have made a mistake, I've sinned, I've hurt somebody, but that's not the end of the sentence. We can keep going. So I think the feeling of guilt, that like hot, horrible, like you and I are both in the like body or the gut triad of the Enneagram. Mm-hmm. So I feel a lot of emotions really physically. Like I feel it in my chest and in my skin and my face. And like guilt is this like hot, horrible, heavy emotion. And it like we were saying at the very beginning, it motivates us to do something, to apologize, to repair, to restore, and to kind of fix what we broke. So I think that, there's a limit to it. We don't need to just like keep heaping guilt upon people. But it does have like a utility, I think.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. Like, I think guilt heaped on without wisdom will eventually bleed into shame. And so, or create shame, because that is how you go from I did wrong to I am wrong as a person. Like, so I can see it bleeding into that. So I would agree with you in kind of that. But yeah, I think about it like I like the idea of utility in it. Like it has a function. I think about my job. I never try to shame people when I'm preaching or when I'm meeting with people. And I never really try to make people feel guilty. But I've had specific conversations with people that are guilty of things. And like some of those are like legal things. And so like I've had conversations like people pastorally that are in really hard places where they are like legitimately guilty. And then I've had more like amorphous spiritual conversations where people just feel a level of guilt. But in both of those, I think my role is always to say like, one, let's navigate that feeling, whether it's like you and I who feel that in our body or people who feel it in their head or their heart or whatever, like try and figure out like how they navigate that. Some people are verbally processing it. Some people are internally or externally processing it, whatever that looks like, but trying to help them navigate it so that I think in this, I actually want to navigate them out of their guilt, away from shame and into conviction, because that's where I do see the overlap. Like I think if your guilt can move you into a healthy conviction of change, Uh, Especially if I think there's actually an underlying assumption in all of this is that you are actually guilty of the thing you're guilty of. Like if you feel guilt over something that you shouldn't, then it's like bad emotion, bad feeling,
Yeah.
bad mechanism. Like, and so I think important caveat to, I think, make sure we mention, and that is that it's like guilt as a rhetorical tool or a preaching tool is not helpful, but is like a way to like actually talk through the real guiltiness of something. So if you're really guilty, I think it could move you into conviction. And now whether that's like legally, like you're convicted to repent, to change, or you have to like do your time, whatever that looks like, or if it's in a spiritual way, like you feel convicted, like, you know, I really harmed Maggie, I feel guilt about the way I spoke to you about something that I should feel like a real level of guilt about.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully it doesn't like trend into shame, but feel like some guilt, lead me to repentance that I wouldn't have probably done unless I felt a conviction to get myself there. You know, like I don't know that, and that's where I see, and I know we're like not trending that, but that's where I think I see the nuance of conviction is it's like both of these things are the emotion you feel. Conviction is the engine for change.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, because when I think about conviction, honestly, I even like felt a little convicted yesterday during like just listening to your sermon, which like you didn't even preach a very like a super convicting sermon, but it was just because I personally was like, I've gotten a lot busier lately and I'm having the feeling of like I need to pull back. I need to like take more time for myself. I have to like get rid of, you know, I can't stop or I can't keep giving at this rate, which like it is good to be aware of burnout.
Yeah.
But sitting there listening to you talking about church tradition and like the rhythms of like Christian life and being part of a church body, I was just kind of like, no, I can do this. Like it wasn't like a conviction of like, wow, I'm so guilty of wanting time for myself to rest. Like that wasn't what I was feeling. It was this like, yeah, like motivation to keep going, of like motivation to continue on the path that I'm on.
That is, can we actually dive? So that's actually a really interesting specific thing we could zero in on, because I think church engagement is something where people can feel shame, guilt, or conviction. And I think, and even preaching this last message, like one of the things that when I wrote my message, I was like, I don't want people to hear shame or guilt in engagement, really. And like conviction if it feels healthy. But like, as you said, I think you said this about like, it wasn't, I did not write a message that was like mechanically designed to be convicting, at least from my perspective. That was not my desire, though I'm glad that it had that effect, if it was positive. But how do you, because I had that conversation, you and I are in a small group together, and we had this conversation with our friends Kaya and Kyle as well, that are, I think we're in a similar place. I think all of us are like in a space where we're doing a lot. And I don't even mean like serving, like, but there's a few of us that are in this like cohort together. You and I specifically podcast together. There's small group on Wednesday nights, which I've only been to like one out of the last 8 weeks of, if that.
Because of said busyness, said doing a lot.
Busyness. There's the Drip, this new service on Thursday night, even though it's only going for a few more weeks before we kill it for the summer. And then there's Sunday. And then like you do things like kids ministry, and other people do hospitality, and some people do youth group, and just like the natural rhythms of life, which are all, I think we might say, I say they're all positive because I'm like a part of the institution, but I think most of us agree they're positive. But where do you balance that? Because I could see you, but also myself and other people I've talked to in the last like 7 to 10 days that are trying to weigh and figure out, are they convicted? Are they guilty? Or are they feeling shame about how they're engaging with the church? And I think for our listeners, if we could find one, like that might be the most resonant thing that's happening for many of them. It's like they're trying to decide, do I push into church or do I stay out? And they're feeling some level of shame, guilt, or conviction about it. Like, so how do you differentiate the difference between those three specifically related to engaging in church?
Yeah. I think, okay, so something that other like recovering reformed theology people may relate to is usually about once a day. I just have this vague feeling of guilt and shame. And it has no source that is real in the world. Usually around like, it's like, or usually before I go to bed at around like 9 p.m., I just feel like just vaguely like guilty, shameful. And sometimes I'll tell my husband, I'm like, God, I feel so bad. And he's like, I feel so guilty. And he's like, why? What'd you do? I'm like, nothing. I haven't done anything. Like, and so I think in those times, and also in times where like there is kind of a topic that I'm thinking about, I try to get to like the root of the feeling of like, okay, so if I heard Danny preach a sermon about being involved in the church, which is like, hypothetically.
Yeah.
And I felt this like hot, heavy feeling of like guilt, shame, or conviction. And I wasn't sure which one it was. What I would do is try to parse apart like, okay, am I feeling guilty because I said that I would volunteer for Sunday school and then I shirked that commitment in some way? I like went to a party the night before, woke up hungover, skipped church, didn't tell. like I would feel a level of guilt over that, of like I committed to doing something and then I chose to have fun and shirk that commitment. That would be like, okay, well, I would be able to identify like, all right, I'm feeling guilt over this.
Yeah.
Am I feeling like I hear this message and I'm thinking like, oh God, like Danny's so right. I'm so lazy and horrible. Like I should be doing more. I should be giving everything to the church. Like it's because I'm so lazy and rotten and bad. That would be like shame of like, I could be giving more. I should be giving more until I die, like that's a little, okay, let's not burn out here. That's really intense. That I feel like would be shame. But like what I felt yesterday and what I feel for me is healthy is like just this, because my instinct was like, okay, I need to pump the brakes because I was starting to get like worried because I've burnt out really significantly before. I've burnt out in churches. I've burnt out in my job. So I'm trying to take on more slowly and like in a measured way so that I don't burn out in either of those things now. And I think what I was feeling, the conviction I was feeling was like, no, keep going. Like you can do this. Like I have the tools at my disposal to like identify burnout, to identify when I've done too much or taken on too much.
Yeah.
So it's like, just keep going. It's okay. Like it was just this kind of like nudge of like, you got this. And so that, to me was very helpful.
Yeah. I was thinking about this while you're talking. Do you think that burnout is its own version of conviction, like a conviction to stop? Like sometimes burnout is seen with like shame and guilt. Like is burnout, because I would say burnout is probably like a conviction to pause, but people often internalize it as like something they should feel guilt or shame about. Or at least in my experience, I've heard people be like, well, I just like when they express to me that they burnt out, they would feel a guilt or shame about. Like I'll use an example. We had a woman come to the church and she was like coming for a few weeks and she's like, I want to like take over kids ministry. And she was like a principal and she was a teacher and she, and I was like, this would be great. And we got coffee and I was like, but here's what I would like to do. Like, please don't serve more than once a week or once a month. Like you're going to burn out. She's like, yeah, I'm a pro. Like I got this. Like I love what we're doing here. And it was like for the better part of 6 months, she didn't really like heed my advice. She like scheduled herself every week. And part of it was probably because she couldn't get volunteers. But at this point, this was like pre your existence at the church. We were like, well, let's just like we won't do kids ministry. Like if we don't have enough volunteers, like it wasn't even regular at that point, but like they felt like it was their like Herculean task to take it on. And then eventually got to the end of the 6 months and like didn't follow any of my advice to like not do these things. And then burned out, which I think is like a strong conviction to like, all right, I need to rest. But then I think internalized that in like anger at the church for putting her there, and also guilt for like stepping away for a season of rest, and then has never really come back because I think they felt shame, guilt, and probably like a positive conviction that led them to rest. Like I was actually like so grateful they like pulled back, and it was like around a really busy time. I'm like, this is great though. Like we need you to rest. This is what I tried to encourage you to do at the beginning. And I'm bummed they're not around anymore, but I am glad they're resting. But then sad that it's like now maybe they see the church as something that it's not, because the lenses are shaded through maybe a lack of wisdom, or like shaded through a lack of like full transparency about what's going on. You know, sometimes I think like this is a completely different rabbit trail, but I think sometimes we can produce our own pain and then we like blame the church for it. And that's usually not a take I take on this podcast, but I'm usually like pretty pro people that are hurt by the church. But I, in my experience, have watched people not heed advice and then walk themselves into the hurt that they were warned they were going to find themselves in. And especially in a church plant like the Well, like new churches always toe the line between the need to do things and the need to like keep people healthy. And people feel a conviction to step up because they want this thing to happen. This is the same thing I've tried to talk to you about. Is like I don't want people to feel like their job is to hold something.
Yeah.
Because I'd rather have you around and us not do the thing for a while than lose the person, if that makes sense. And I think people feel such a great passion for the thing that we're building that they think their cross is to bear is this. And like, that's again, an over spiritualizing in a bad framework, I think, that pushes like rest, but frames it as like conviction.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. That was like a little bit of like a soapbox and rabbit trail, but I was thinking about this person and they got me thinking about that. And I was like, it's just interesting. Like, there's no perfect rhyme or reason to it, but I just never want people to like get hurt by the church. But then I get frustrated when they get hurt doing the thing that I warned them was going to hurt them and like tried to tell them not to do.
Yeah. I think that people have really complicated relationships with authority too. And so when they enter into a church that has an authority structure, even though like you aren't like a dictator, you're like a very caring leader. And so is JT. I think that sometimes people might bring in, their own I guess, baggage, just their own experiences with authority, with religion, with we also live in a culture that kind of like borderline glorifies burnout. Definitely glorifies work. Yeah. It's that damn Protestant work ethic that just like haunts the American psyche of like, if you are not grinding every second of every day and like optimizing and productivity maxing every single day, then like you are a failure. And that is just like, that's made up. Like we made that up. That's not real. That's not nature. That's not how any of this works. So
Jesus maxing.
Jesus maxing.
It is funny too, because it like goes directly, because I think like evangelicals would say that like work harder, do more, like burn yourself out, like grind yourself to the bone to like help Jesus produce. But then it's like going back to what we said earlier, it's like, but we're not the ones actually producing the fruit. Like we're supposed to be like abiding so strong that Jesus is producing the fruit, and those things seem not congruent, but they're like both preached simultaneously within that tradition of like burn yourself out, beat yourself up, but remember that none of it actually came from you, even though like you lost all these things in the process of burning yourself out to do it.
Yeah. You are a really good evangelical apologist. And by that, I mean, I can tell you've argued with a lot of evangelicals.
I certainly have done that, but I also like, that was my introduction to Christianity. So in some ways it feels like I know how to speak the language, even though I don't agree with it. Like I know I can often make the argument for them, even though I substantially disagree with it.
Yeah. I do too. I feel like, yeah, sometimes I will work myself into the like rabbit trail spiral on my own because it feels like playing chess with myself sometimes because I'm like, I know what I believe now, but I also was an evangelical Christian for like 20 something years. And so like the majority of my life. And so then I can be like, oh, well, the next move would be to say this. And then the next move would be,
Yeah.
so whatever. Get into arguments with myself over shame and conviction and what have you.
That's very funny. As an 8, I appreciate arguments. Also, like I almost never feel guilt or shame. So it's like it is a funny thing for me to talk about because like those are emotions that like rarely
So wild.
arrive for me.
I literally like if you've seen New Girl, the conversation between, I don't remember which one of the male main characters it was, but Jess, the main character, one of the boys is saying like, do you just like go through life worrying about what people would think of you? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, isn't that exhausting? She's like, it's hard. And I'm like, that's literally like that snapshot is like my life. I'm like, yes, I am the oldest daughter. I'm in I'm a business owner. I'm in like, I've self-selected into all of these like really leadership type roles. And I feel a constant stream of guilt and shame because of my evangelical upbringing and my anxiety disorder. So that'll do it. It's a fun cocktail.
I think it's Schmidt who has that conversation with her. But I will say, I probably do feel like some level of guilt and shame, but like I would say because I'm like a pretty self-assured person, it often is packaged for me internally as like if I feel an emotion strong enough, I feel it as conviction. And like the gut in me, I think I like feel things strongly. And I would probably use the word conviction a lot in terms of like how I would classify things. But there are times I feel it's just funny because I was about to say like right now I'm like weighing a lot of things and I feel convictions, but like someone else might perceive them as like shame, like for like thinking or feeling or trying to, but I just don't put a lot of shame on myself. So maybe I'm just like really emotionally healthy and self-aware now, or I just don't know how to feel those emotions. But I even tried to like say I was feeling shame and I'm like, I don't know that that's how I really feel about those things.
Well, and it's hard because like emotions are such an internal experience. And so like trying to explain it to somebody else who experiences that feeling in a completely different way and at different times, it can be really hard to like talk about in a way that makes sense to a lot of people. So
yeah, we're the only ones living in our heads. So
yep.
Or our hearts or our guts. So well, I feel convicted without shame or guilt that we should end this podcast episode.
Okay.
But this one was interesting to me. Like, is there anything for you that like stood out as like a nugget to highlight before we kind of land the plane?
Shame, bad. Conviction, guilt, good, ?
If I remember, that'll be the title of this episode.
No. It's such a bad title.
It is probably I think it's good though. I think the algorithms will appreciate it.
Great.
But I think that's right.
I think a lot word when few word do trick.
I think there's a lot of truth in that. It's and if my nugget would be, I think there's a lot more nuance and overlap, except in shame. Shame just sucks. Like let's just say let's shame out of the group chat. Let's just get it out of here.
Yeah.
So, well, this was fun. This is the first time recording in like 2 weeks where I haven't felt like a headache or sick. or my internet hasn't sucked. So I'm just like happy to be back.
Love it. Glad to have you.
All right. Well, let's do this again soon.
Sounds good.